name is Michael Amendolara, and we're here at this wonderful exhibition of Leland Bell paintings. And I was invited by Stephen Harvey of Stephen Harvey Fine Art Projects to host these talks, and I want to thank him and the Studio School for housing this really wonderful exhibition. And I want to introduce our panelists for today. John Goodrich, and John recently had quite a nice showing in an exhibition called The Light of Day, which was well received by landscape painters I know in Brooklyn, commenting on it and asking me about it. Ying Li, who had her recent solo exhibition at Temma Salisbury. Wonderful exhibition, and Alice Zinnes. And Alice had a couple of shows upstate, and one of them I think featuring old works and then new works. So all of the people that I've invited because they are painters and good painters. And I just have to say to Mark Larivier, I would include a sculptor in that group. And I'm sure Leland often would take us to see sculptures that he adored, and so there was no clear distinction. But anyway, I want to move to this painting and discuss this painting. And there are 6 of these morning series in this show. I think I counted correctly, but I think it's a mistake to view them as practice rounds. I mean, it's some of the criticisms of Leland's work over the years seems to couch in that kind of language as though he were practicing for his larger paintings. And I don't think that's the case. I think it was more similar to Billie Holiday, singing "Don't Explain" for the 500th time. And she would say in an interview, I don't think I've ever sung a song the same way twice. What I bring to my music is my life, the way I feel. And Leland was a jazz musician all his life, and certainly more so in the earlier part of his life. And I think that he used these paintings as a jazz musician would call it a fake book, where they had points at which they would know to come in. All the groups would come together, and then they could each go off on their various solos and the like. And Leland would talk about his paintings as being jazz art. There are many things about his work that come from the painters that he loved when he was crafting, as he would refer to it, his métier. And Mondrian, certainly a big example. When Leland was a very young man, he and Jackson Pollock had a job at the Guggenheim, which he was fired for, telling the people at the museum that if they really wanted to see good painting, they should go to Sidney Janis' gallery and see the Mondrians. Years ago, when I first met Leland, you could still go to Sidney Janis, and they would pull things out for you to see, and you could see where Leland learned a great deal about keeping his paintings fresh, about slipping these layers of very, very light grays over what he'd already done so that he could still see and then go back into his paintings and keep them very fresh. And so this Mondrian Leger was also a huge, huge influence on Leland, and particularly something that gets a lot of play, Leland's black lines, okay? I don't know, when somebody says that, I'm thinking, I'm afraid of what I'm going to hear. I think it's very misunderstood. But Leger talks very clearly about using a black line in combination with local color, and he said that they had a multiplicative effect rather than an addition, than one being added to the other, that together that they gave the painting a kind of super drive. And I think that the more that Leland painted, the more that he went in that direction and employed that technique. A painter that you might not, really rush to in terms of thinking about his development, but who is a huge, huge influence on Leland, is Lucas Cranach. And again, I go back to this idea that, these multiple versions of the morning painting, for example, or like practice rounds. It's crazy. Lucas Cranach, for example, painted a subject called Hercules and Omphale. I mean, literally 20 times, and that's what I know of. I don't know, there's probably a lot more. Same with his Adam and Eve and everything. But the point more specifically is how he learned to juggle these limbs in a way that kept the figures so completely unified. And this painting really blows me away in that he's really composing with form, just such a high experience in painting. I mean, everything has to come together for you to feel a form. And it's difficult maybe to describe to a layperson or a younger person who's just starting to paint what that means. But I mean, if I could come over and push you, that gives you kind of like the feeling of what it's like to compose with a form. It's like Brock said, it's not enough for you to show the person what you're painting. You have to make them feel it. And Brock was such an incredible influence and an incredible love of Leland's. But again, going back to the Cranach, I mean, if you go and to the Met and study the Judgment of Paris for a month, 2 months, 3 months, and come back and tell me what you feel. Is he, like when this figure, like I say, he's composing with form. I mean, the carriage of the arms, the whole body really, especially, calling attention to the upper part of the body, how her, she's lilting to one side, and how the arms, I mean, there's no problem with it, moving from one arm to the next, that there's an ample space there. Or how he comes up here, he knows right where the forearm starts to the wrist. Not some kind of gross academic way. You got all the muscles there and everything, and the whole thing looks terrible. It's not like that at all. He shows you the wrist. He shows you how the hand then turns from the wrist, and it breaks in color. I'm not sure what you can see, on Instagram, but the color breaks and turns so that the hand just moves just that much farther into this wonderful fog of blueness that just undulates. I mean, has the window outside and the wall, and now this color is not the same as this color over here. There's a shift. It's so moody and gorgeous. And I really hate when people say, yeah, he got these black lines and fill it in with flat color. He hated that remark. And talk about it, say, people talk about flat space, and I never quite know what they mean. And it just, there's so much to a painting like this. I mean, I came here and I drew for an hour, and I left thinking, like, I know less about this painting than I thought when I came in. It just really is something quite remarkable, the tip of the head. And when you start to really, enter this painting, and you see that it is, in a sense, fully realized in a way that does not jump out at you. And the rhythm here of those two arms and these two arms, how they're like, this one swings up and this one swings down, and you feel that motion. Like I said, it's like Brock said, you have to make them touch it. And he's able to do that to, have this lake, which is the farther one behind, be in such harmony with all of this happening. It's really, it's quite a remarkable thing. And I do want to, at some point, get into his discussions of pigmentation, which we had numerous discussions about this over a period of 15 years. But I want to turn it over to our next speaker, and there'll be, we can have a dialogue about this, but I just wanted to start with that enthusiasm that I feel and try to correct the record that he's, practicing to get to this point. There's 6 of these here. I don't think they're all as successful as this one, but I just, I think this is a masterpiece. It should be hanging in the Modern Art Museum. And I think the whole, slew of critics and historians at this, I just don't understand why they're not getting this. But anyway, I'm going to turn it over to John Goodrich.
Thank you, Michael. And I knew Leland starting in 1974. I saw him at a summer school. I knew nothing about him, and here was a guy who liked to lecture, do slide lectures. And he'd speak passionately, made a lot of sounds, like I'm coming here, da, da, over here, over there. Very impassioned speeches, and my first reaction was, either this guy's nuts, or he's very insightful and very passionate about a certain kind of painting. And I knew him for about 20 years, studied with him formally for part of that time, attended a lot of lectures. I realized he actually did see very deeply, and the best eye for painting beginner I ever met, actually. And he was undeniably passionate about it. And of course, people who know him knew that he got into these fabulous arguments with other teachers and students, practically everybody. But he was all rooted in his passion for a certain kind of painting. I think it was a very high standard he had. I do think the color is so important in these paintings, and I do think he saw just not contemporary paintings in a certain way, but all of painting. So again, let's take his reference to Giotto or Titian or whoever. What does Giotto do? Giotto gives you that tremendous gravity of gesture of forms. Not a lot of modeling, but it's there. Excuse me, what's in Titian? Well, it's in gravity. In the way that Bronzino or Moroni or Bassano don't achieve. There's a gravity, of course, there's a lot of illusionism, a lot of grand brushwork, but beneath it all is that gravity. And I think that gravity is what Leland thought was a standard. I don't know if he'd use that word, but to make things feel real, to give a presence to objects in using the most elemental materials of painting. There's colors, there's lines. No other medium uses them the way that painting does. Not illustration. Not illustration, not cartooning, nothing else. And these are about color. Of course, he was a great draftsman too, but he's so articulate with color if you view it in a certain way, a way which may not be apparent for everybody. And so Michael was saying how, yes, there's a difference between these blues. There's a whole qualitative difference. So this blue could be as different as this from this, or this from this. I think he's measuring color the way Matisse did, or Giotto, or Mondrian, or Delacroix, all those among his favorite artists. He'd measure those colors and give you a certain density to it. He used to say that, technically colors have tone, intensity, and hue, but what really matters is the weight or the density of the color. So this departs from this to a certain extent, this from this and this. The whole configuration of colors, and the colors animate the drawing, they move the shapes along at a certain speed. And here I get this tremendous sense of that vertical figure resisting gravity. You kind of back up here, absorb the whole image. There's such a distance from this, we get way down here, and this works its way up, all the way up to here. And it's patches of color, which is what every painting most fundamentally is. And I think he's got what Giotto does in a different way, and Titian, and Chardin, and Corot, all those painters he really loved. And he's doing it, he's recreating the essence of what you see. And that's not apparent to everybody because I think they want that, they want a couple things. They want that invitation in with descriptive brushwork, with the luscious painting, heightened colors, whatever. They want that invitation. The other thing is we're so used to recognizing objects. Our whole visual systems are built around absorbing things and moving on. So there's a figure, there's a doorway, and that encourages us not to see what makes the doorway back in our lizard brains where we just absorb optical sensations. Instead, we recognize it. And this is about the most essential elements, powers of colors and lines, it seems to me, in Giotto or Renoir. Renoir happens to be more buttery and atmospheric and so forth. But again, I feel this is real in terms of shapes, lines, and colors working together. And so you do get a sense of a tremendous height up to here. And this release streaming across through that barrier, being held up, kicking back, as Michael was saying. So every color is made to count in coordination with what the drawing is doing. And you can see these black lines are a way of reminding you he's not going to give up, he's not going to be slack, he's going to get the maximum from each increment. He's moving up those figures. It has to all add up to one effect, one gathering effect. And the black lines don't really bother me. They neither interfere or add to the effect for me, but they're part of this method. And I think one of the things he did, people know that he would have a work in a show, that he'd take it home and work on it again. So it wasn't as if he was saying, this is done, this is me, take a look. It was part of his experiment. And I'll just close by quoting something here. It's in the catalog. He loved Duran, of course. And this is a quote in the catalog. Something Duran said, "Nothing really belongs to us, neither our emotions, nor our sensations, nor any of the gifts which are furnished us by nature. Why pride ourselves on our so-called originality?" So I view these as work by someone who wasn't trying to impress you with a style. He was trying to share with you the essence of the looking. And it's something that connects all the painting. Again, Giotto, Mondrian, Watteau art, the whole range. It's all color and patches, and this gets to the essence of it. It makes something, I think, intensely real in its particular terms. So thank you. I'll pass on to Ying.
Hello. I studied with Leland at Present School of Design. That was in 85 to 87, and pretty soon after I came to this country from China, and I didn't have much English that time, but I just hooked on, right away. And I didn't know him at all, and I didn't know that program. I went there just solely because I could ride my bike there, close. And I remember I went to the interview, before they decide if they want you or not. And Leland is pretty intimidating, so there, has such a, presence. And also I was so afraid I wouldn't understand what they say, the question. But and then he just asked me a very simple question. He said, "Who the artist you like?" I think every student got to be asked that same question. And luckily, I just saw Bernard show in Washington, D.C., and Phillips Collection. So I said, "Bernard." And I saw this smile, very faint, quick smile on his face. And I thought I hit the right button. And, turned out Phillips Collection, has such a significant meaning for him, and also, for all the painters. I remember years later, he took the whole class at Parsons to Phillips Collection. to see his retrospective there. But he didn't really talk about his own work in the shop. He took us all down to the basement to see their collections, not on the wall, it's all hanging storage, those flat panels. That was an amazing experience. Also, they taught me something about, a good teacher could do. A good teacher, can really tell you something they believe, but at the same time, I saw he practiced just, all what he said to us. And he really put all the things together in his work of his love for a number of artists. I see this show, actually before, I saw a number of his works, his shows. To me, I think he really carried the Ren beyond. And the way he combined, figurative and storytelling, these paintings has such amazing presence, just make you wonder what's going on there. You notice something important there, and the vehicle he used to tell his story. And I remember he talked about the Mondrian's work, and particularly he talked about Mondrian's using of those black lines. He kept saying, look how sensitive. Each line is different from the other. The width, the pressure, and how they're related to the color next to it. And I see in this show the way he used line, exactly what he said about Mondrian's work. And also the way he used line to bring geometry and organic forms together. It's a really, he created his own language. Also, I remember, there are a few things I remember so clearly. He talked about the ancient Roman frescoes, the Villa of Mysteries in Pompeii, and I just couldn't help to see it's right here. He just brought, he brought the color, the form, and the line all together, to tell the story. There is also, it was interesting. I asked my students at Harvard College to listen to to watch the panel discussion by Horace Stanley, that panel discussion. And also I asked them to do a little research before the talk, And 3 students, they all mentioned the connection between music and his painting. They just they were right on. And one student mentioned how the line carried the rhythm through the painting. And he's a drummer, and I see the way he used line. It's a sort of like the drummer to support and to push all the different solos, by the saxophone, by the trumpet, and the role of the drummer sort of carry all the movement beyond and put all the elements together. I see these chunks of color as the solos, and how the lines carry, the space and the rhythm through the page. I hear just like what John mentioned, when he talked about the work he made these gestures. He's doing it, and he made a song. He said, here it is, that beat, that. He just in the right way, it's like, I feel like there is a lightning, come out. And the way he connect things and how he practice and how he passed to us, it's one thing, it's all together. And I just feel so fortunate to have him as my teacher and feed me all this incredible range of work. People say, oh, he has very limited, his taste, what he like. But I think his range is tremendous. I remember he talked about the Greek vase, the mummies, and all the way to the current time, and how he connect all this, into the surface of his painting, in the most timeless way. It's amazing.
Hi folks, I'm Alice Zinnes, and I apologize, I wrote something just because I wanted to be sure I'd be efficient with my time. So I will try to read this a little expressively, and then I want to talk about that painting a little bit. So when I first came to the studio school, I hadn't painted much, and I was quite insecure. I really was. Luckily, early on, Leland realized he and my mom were both good friends with the painter Nell Blaine, and he knew my mom, Harriet Zinnes, who was a poet. I felt Leland, therefore, gave me special attention, but now in retrospect, I realize he actually gave many of the students special attention. I think he really loved teaching, especially the students who were devoted to painting, which is what so many of us here at the studio school were. I remember once telling Leland how excited I was about something I discovered with Picasso. I can't remember what I said, and Leland responded with a tirade against Picasso. I was totally shocked. I was like, oh my goodness. But I realized at the time that Picasso hadn't died that long ago, really, and had been quite a force for all my teachers to contend with. And so it made sense to me that Leland was fighting back. I don't remember exactly what he said, but in his article on Duran, he said something to the effect, the cubist, and he probably meant Picasso, shattered the object and recreated something from the debris. I suspect he felt Cubism was a collection of parts, while Leland was always looking for the ensemble, the whole in which parts remain themselves, but participate in the harmony of the whole. That's what he felt Duran did. I also think, and this is me of course, that Picasso is a tonal artist. That is, an artist who creates light for value contrast, and that Picasso used color primarily for emotive purposes. But Leland, like Duran, saw color as light. And that love of color as light is something as a student I definitely felt drawn to. In fact, to this day, that's what I teach at Pratt. I feel lucky that Leland was one of my first teachers because he was one of the few studio school teachers at the time who really understood color as light. And I can't overemphasize that enough. He really talked about color. I remember Leland once coming up to a painting I was working on, and he said, "You just put a little blue." And he stuck his finger in the cerulean blue on my palette, smudged it on my painting, which kind of really upset me at the time. But then my whole painting absolutely glowed with life. It was quite a learning experience for me to see the power of color and color relationships. In retrospect, I realized how much Leland loved and used this type of blue. But he probably used cobalt rather than the cheap cerulean that I was using. And I wonder if he inherited that love of blue from Karl Knaths, who was one of Leland's first teachers, and who also used a lot of blue. I remember the first time I was in Leland's studio, and there was his drum set sitting in the corner. You can see over there. Leland was a serious drummer. Ying has also said that. I think I remember his telling me he played in Larry Rivers' band. Rhythm for Leland was important as color, and maybe he actually saw color as the rhythm of color. I can just imagine him taking a break from painting and going to his drums to remind himself of the rhythm he was searching for visually. That thought brings to mind how once he would blurt it out, appalled at my permanently paint-covered brush handles. Actually, my whole body was paint-covered. And he said, "How come you can't clean your brush handles?" I suspect in order to run over to his drums, he needed to clean his hands, and so his handles were always clean. But I also suspect his handles remain clean because that suggests a certain control, a certain slowness at choosing the exact color, the exact line, the exact structure. I think Leland was searching for an absolute harmony of parts, where colors were pitched perfectly together within their space and in dialogue with others. He was searching for what he saw in Duran, something between, and I quote from Leland, "the visible and the secret, being suspended in time, meditating on the mystery of reality." And I just want to look, this is, I think, a relatively early painting, but just talking about blue, it's an orchestration in blue, and he might first go to Leland's shirt, and then that takes you, there are all these different blues in here, it takes you to that, which then, and then also then you get up to the kind of gray that's in his face, and it's a blue gray, and then that jumps you over to here. You've got like these blues that are kind of speaking to what these are, but are they the same? But no, they're a little different, but then that jumps you right down to here, and these grays suddenly become blue, and they're part of that blue harmony. And then you start looking at the drum set, and then you realize that all these colors, they sort of look like that, but that one's more blue than these, but then this is even more blue than what that is. And then you jump over here, and you get to that really kind of light blue. And then all these blues, you jump from one to the other, to the grays, to the blues, and then something that looked like a warm suddenly becomes cool. And it's just this tremendous orchestra of these colors changing from one to another and bouncing from one place to another. The same thing happens with these kind of red, burnt umber sort of colors, and they jump around like this is a little different from that. It jumps you up to all of those that are a little different, that then jump you to his face. So you see it just a little different, but maybe it's the same, and then it jumps you to the painting. And all of a sudden, you're kind of going through a full circle around all these colors. So, thank you so much.
Michael, did you want to?
Well, I think I've, I left things unexpressed. Actually, I could definitely blab for the whole hour, and I'm sure to your dismay, but I do have more things to express about this painting, which is the one that I've chosen to discuss today. Not that there aren't wonderful things all over, but you can learn a great deal from inspecting the surface of this. You can see from the pentimenti. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term. It comes from the word repentance, which people think of that, pulling out your rosary beads or praying, it's not that. But the word repent means to change your mind. And the pentimenti, you can see the layers of paint that have been painted over. And in this case, looking at the pentimenti, you can see that he's painted through this whole figure at least 4 times that we can see just by looking at the surface of this. And also the handling of the paint in this light form of her body is really, that it's shifting around, and the brushwork is just so perfect. It really, this could hang next to a Baltus very easily and not suffer for it. It's just such a great thing. Also, there were things about his studio that I think might be of interest. He kept a carousel of cat food cans, and they all had their little plastic lid on, which is thanks to his cat who's named Pisa. So he kept a lot of acrylic paint in there in a very liquid form. So when you see that this, you look at this after a while, you get to realize how much the color is shifting from one area to the next. And this patch of blue here has a lot more green in it than this blue over here. And oftentimes I felt that he was, in a sense, hiding colors inside other colors. If you look at like a phthalo or you look at a magenta and you try to just use these colors, they're very transparent, and a lot of times you use them and they end up looking a lot like hardtack candy in a way that's really not very appealing at all. But he definitely had a taste for these rich, transparent blues, and oftentimes he would come to our painting studio at Parsons, and his thumb would be blue because he was always taking his paintings and working back into them, and working back into them, to the point where his wife would take them and hide them. Because he used to bring his paintings, his studio was on the top floor, and he would bring them down to her, and what do you think? And she said, this is great, you should keep this. And he'd go back upstairs and just tear the whole thing apart and repaint it, and over and over. And this was something that he would talk about in relationship to Ruwalt. Again, someone who would work on painting for a period of like 20 years. And I think he learned a great deal from Ruwalt. Again, I wanted to talk to you about pigments, because I think, as a young person, I realized that I wasn't getting what I wanted. I'm trying to get to the bottom of this. I said, well, I'm going to start with Cennini, who was a Trecento writer on materials. And I got this book, and I open it up, and the first thing it tells you to do is to grind the shoulder of a goat. And I think, what? I think I might have more luck at pearl paint and try to, deal with that. But we would talk about the other teachers, about teaching in general, about painting in general, and he really hated the notion that color began with the Impressionists. I mean, he would go back to these Coptic portraits at the Met. These things are thousands of years old, and they only had, it seems to me, I could be, speaking, a little bit incorrectly, but I think they only had like 4 pigments that they could work with. And if you go there and you see those things, first of all, you can thank Leland for making a pest of himself over and over and over until the Met agreed to hang those things. But going back to the idea of Impressionism and people who think that color began with Impressionism, we would talk about that. I mean, people would say, well, why would you put an ochre on your palette when you can make ochre? I said, well, sure, you can make ochre out of cadmiums. I mean, they cost about 10 times as much, but if that's what you want to do, you can rival that color. But once you get to that color that you've made now out of very expensive pigments, and you have this ochre, you can't do what that ochre would do from there. If you put white into that, you'll see how cold that mixture is compared to an earth color. And I think that Leland was constantly trying to reconcile this broader palette with his earthen palette. This portrait over here reminds me of something that Titian said, that a great painter really only needs black, white, and red. And I think that this was a very late portrait by Leland, and if you look at the earlier things, you can see, much more pigmentation, coming out of that small circle of very closely knit earthen colors. And I think that he just left that behind more and more in a feeling of obsession with the form. And I keep going back to this idea that he composed by a rhythm of form. It's a rather difficult concept, I think. But let's go over to this painting here and see a little bit more what this is like. This figure, for example, I remembered him being in his studio and seeing this figure was blocked in. And I mentioned to him that it reminded me of Watteau's Mezzatine, and he just lit up and he said, "Oh, that's very perceptive." And if you look at the Mezzatine, It doesn't look much like that. It's really in the form that you see that they're very similar. The mezzotine is, of course, this man painted by Watteau playing the guitar, and we would talk about his hands as being portraits of hands. It's certainly a very remarkable painting. But going back to this idea of form, again, this is a very brightly pictured, colored picture, but he has this, this stolid arm here, and then it's just such a generous, ample amount of space between this shoulder and that shoulder, and the way that this arm cantilevers out. I mean, you can really feel the bones in this figure. It's really remarkable in that respect. And the color, his penchant for blue. Yes, he did have a very clear love of the color blue, and at times he told me that he felt like he was getting carried away with it. But this picture here, he has all of these blues that they circulate in a way, throughout the painting as though you were dealing cards on the table, throwing them out here, this one here, this one here, except that it's not like flat on the table. There are levels going in and out of the space. And so he has this blue, and then this dark blue kind of marries into this black over here, sort of accentuating this pillar of this woman's arm, and then this blue swings into here, this blue comes back, smack back the other way, and down into this blue here. And it seems to me that this magenta is kind of like a link between the blues and the reds. I mean, the reds have their own theme in this painting, and the way that this bird form comes down in the central figure here and lightens up to this red here. But the whole thing seems to be kicked off by this magenta, and even into the orange behind this figure here. I think that he was really concerned with expanding figure painting and painting the appearances of things using the language that he inherited from Mongrain, from Leger, from all of the painters that of the era that we call pure plasticism. And I think it was really quite successful. He had a great friendship with the painter Éléon, and I think Éléon was equally concerned. And people have criticized Leland and said that he really just imitated what Éléon had already done. And I think it's really, again, people don't know how to look at painting. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Éléon, but I think that Leland's color is actually borders on the profound in comparison with Éléon. And just a quick note: there is an Éléon in the lobby. Coincidentally, that is the exact place in this building where I met Éléon for the first time, and that began a friendship that I think lasted about 6 seconds. Anyway, I was able to really get to know and love the paintings of Éléon. That Leland owned many paintings of and drawings of Éléon that he displayed in his home. And there certainly was a love there. And one thing I want to say about the panel discussion, it's not the kind of thing that you normally hear. I mean, there was a lot of love expressed in that panel. I mean, the people that talk about other artists is usually very dry. I mean, Stanley, for example, was almost feverish. He had so much to say, so much he wanted to say about Leland. Oh my God, he smelled good. I mean, it's like, okay, But I understand. I mean, he was the kind of guy. I saw his painting when I was in college, and someone told me that he was teaching at a place called the Studio School. And I said, I want to go there, and I want to study with this guy, And I did come here, and I met him, and I was not prepared. I was just a country boy. And, meeting somebody like Leland, who was so bold and so clear about how he felt, about painting. And it maybe seems a little sentimental, but it's not. Leland wanted to bring his whole life to the act of painting. And he talked about that with Duran as well. That Duran wanted to bring everything, every bit of consciousness. And, people talk about painting lives inside your head or something like that. I think that painting lives in your whole body,
That's great. Michael, do you mind if we ask for some questions
Sure,
from our virtual audience?
absolutely.
Great, thank you. So if anyone has any questions out here for our wonderful speakers and former students of Leland's, please go ahead and put them in the comments. In the meantime, while you're thinking of your questions, special thank you to Michael, John, Alice, and Ying for coming in today and sharing your beautiful memories of Leland and his practice. And also, please come visit the show. Again, it's open until October 23rd. Thank you, Stephen Harvey, for curating this wonderful exhibition. And of course, we have this really lovely catalog available for sale. So please pick it up in person, or you can certainly purchase it online. And again, if you have any questions, please enter them into the comments, and I'm sure our beautiful, wonderful guests will be happy to answer them. Did anyone else have any closing remarks? Any kind of final thoughts that you'd like to share?
You have a question.
Oh yeah, question, please.
What's the most significant impact that Leland's had on your own work?
You said a little louder?
What's the most significant impact that Leland's had on your own personal work?
Well, for me, it changed my whole view of painting. It seemed that passionate, lifelong adventure, and then also that there were reference points, which were what you could find in museums. You could always go there, be reminded of who did it in the most profound way. So it had a big effect. So his opinion became my standard for painting.
I think his obsession to make it right, to make it absolutely right, to make it the best he could do. And I think his whole life it's driven to that. And also he has such a high standard, for himself and for his students. And it's not just about doing one painting, doing one good painting. It's not about that. It's really about how you can develop into something just bigger and just really significant. It's I remember I went to see him when he was in the hospital and he was really sick, and he was really weak and he lost a lot of weight, and he just lay in the bed, and there was a mustacho distribute money and right hanging on the wall, and then when he lay down you could see that. He didn't talk about his illness at all. He just talked about that painting. He talked about the back of the kid, the child, the woman holding that child. He talked about the weight of the form. And I had the same experience when I went to visit Al Crash, who was a dear, dear friend of Leland. And Al Crash lay in the bed. Guess what's on the wall? A Leland painting on the wall. And Al just started, he was like a 99-year-old. When we got there, I took my boyfriend there to meet him. And when we got there, I didn't know if he recognized us. And but then my boyfriend is a jazz musician, so they started to talk about jazz. And then I saw him start to wake up, and then he talked about how he and Leland sneak into the clubs. And then Al said, oh, Ying, take the painting down. That's the Leland painting hang there. And so I hand to him. He sat by the bed and he started talking about the line in the painting. He said, look how this travels and how this travels to, the upper right corner of the composition. It's just these artists they live in their art. That's really, in a way, the most significant lesson I learned. And we all have our own, sensibilities, personalities. You deal with certain issues in a very different way. I don't believe there is a one way. You have a different way to deal with it, but how you can carry that, how you can really take that into a level, just deeper, not just, the look. That's what I think, Leland is just like inject into me, yeah.
Hard to top that, so I'm just gonna say I completely agree with what both John and Ying said. I think, and I'll just add to that, I don't even know if I can add anything. Ying was so articulate and beautiful and passionate, but maybe, it's that passion that I really got from Leland, and maybe also the impossibility of really being able to get it, the sense of trying for the absolute, trying for whatever it is, the purity, the absolute integrity of trying to get to what you have to say, and you never quite can say it, but you just keep trying because that's the only choice we have, and this is absolute passion, absolute passion.
Another thing is, it's very interesting. He didn't talk about the students' work that much. He came in, he brought his tray of slides, and got on the tray. I could just see he was excited, to look at those images and talk about them. And the one thing he said to me, he looked at my painting. He said, "Why don't you use red? Use red. Take off some of the paint. Take off some of the paint." Instead of taking off the paint, actually, I paint even thicker. I went the other way. But in a way, it's really, he makes you aware you need to do something. You don't just stay there. You need to push it to wherever, the painting takes you.
Yeah, and I think one of the neat things about him, he didn't think, these were elite painters, the famous painters today, or the painters' museums. They were more like fellow travelers on this great adventure. And I can remember being in school, and he picked one of the students who wasn't hardly in her circle, and he'd really be thrilled with their work. So it was just painting apart from all the context, the social context.
And they're all on the same platform. The Pompeii paintings, I remember so clearly he talked about that villa of the mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm in this room, that's what I see. Mm-hmm. And then he talked about Mondrian, the next slide. He talked about them in the same language. That kind of consistency, the way he delivered his idea so clearly. That just click on. That just there is no some in between. It's just this is why it's good. Just so clear.
And I think you kind of have to respect it, disagree or not. I mean, there's all kinds of ways of looking at painting. He was very consistent, and what he said was true.
Yep.
There are certain aspects to certain paintings, and they're consistent throughout history, and that's what he pursued. And it's a moving experience.
Yep. And he himself doing what he said. It's just when I look at you, it's amazing. Somebody should take a picture. You look at anything. Look at the red in that painting.
Well, this is a great place to stop.
I know.
Thank you all. And I just want to share that this is the first of 3 events And please join us next Wednesday at 1, either in the gallery or on Instagram Live. So thank you all, and I know that our Instagram community is just flooding the comment section with thanks. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great question.